From commie cars to Camaros that run 0 to 60 in 20 seconds, there have been a lot of terrible cars throughout history. So today we're going to take a look at some of the worst cars ever and see exactly what makes each one so bad. As a quick preface, I want to mention two things. One, this list is in no particular order. And two, get down in the comments and let me know what you think are the worst cars ever. I want to hear your opinion on this. Alright, getting straight into this, let's take a look at the first terrible car which I very strangely love for some reason, and that's the Corvair. And I know for a lot of the younger viewers out there, you've probably never even heard of this car or seen one driving around, because, well, most of these cars are dead now. And when the Corvair made its debut in 1960, it made a big splash and turned lots of heads with its unconventional exterior design, but it didn't stop there because it also was mechanically unconventional too, with a rear-mounted air-cooled engine. And really, it was that unique rear engine design that allowed the Corvair to have such a sleek and unique design. And compared to just about any other car from this time frame, the design of the Corvair was so far ahead of its time that I almost don't want to put it on this list at all. On the underside though, GM also did more unconventional things, mostly just to save money, and that unfortunately resulted in some pretty terrible handling and very unsafe driving characteristics. What do I mean by this? Well, the Corvair used a swing axle suspension design, which in certain situations could very easily lead to oversteer. And this whole thing really gained attention with Ralph Nader's book, Unsafe at Any Speed, which criticized the Corvair's safety. Chevy later made massive safety improvements to the Corvair, mostly including a new independent rear suspension system to replace that swing axle suspension system. They also made big improvements on the braking system, plus adding a collapsible steering column, as well as seatbelts. You might think it's weird to mention the steering column when you're talking about vehicle safety, and it is weird, but in the case of the Corvair, it really needed it, because the earlier Corvairs, the ones with the non-collapsible steering column, those steering columns could quite literally impale you in the case of a front-end collision, so pretty scary. There were other problems with the Corvair, but you get the point. It was hard to drive, easy to crash, and really bad when you did crash it. This next car I'm pretty sure everyone out there has heard of, whether it was in some sort of story or in some sort of joke, and that's the AMC Gremlin. Now this is quite a curious vehicle because its proportions are hilariously odd for a compact car, and there's actually a reason for that. At the time that AMC brought this car to the market, they were pretty well in the weeds, and even worse, American car buyers were shifting to smaller subcompact cars. So if AMC wanted to beat Ford and GM to the punch and bring a really good subcompact car to the market, they needed to develop something very fast, and so that's exactly what they did. They took a car that they were already offering to the public, the AMC Hornet, and basically said, screw it, let's chop it in half. The result is what you see in front of you, a long and low hood, long front overhang, and bob tail. On the bright side though, the Gremlin was pretty cheap at around $1,800, $1,900, which is about $15,000 in today's currency. On the downside, it was cheap for a reason. The Gremlin was basically a glorified shitbox. The Gremlin was ultimately void of anything fancy, including suspension, and when you combine cheap suspension with a short wheelbase, you end up with some pretty bad handling, particularly at the rear of the car, where lack of suspension travel can quite literally cause the Gremlin to spin out. With odd proportions, scary handling, cheap construction, it's safe to say that the AMC Gremlin is kind of a turd. Honestly though, the Gremlin was a little bit better than you'd expect on performance, and it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Now this next car I had quite literally never heard of until about a week ago at the bar, and that's the Hugo GV, aka the commie car. And that commie car name is even funnier for the fact that this car was offered in the States during the Reagan era. Either way, the Hugo's arrival to the States was put together by one Malcolm Bricklin, a man who had previously gone bust in multiple other automotive-related companies. Somehow, some way, he convinced a communist Yugoslavian automaker to make Hugos that would appeal to Americans so that he could sell them, but also to keep the price really cheap, selling the cars for as little as $4,400. But as we've seen with other small automakers basically throughout all of history, setting up shop in the United States automotive market is not very easy at all. In fact, it's borderline impossible. That being said though, a total of 141,000 units were produced, but by 1992 sales had dropped down to just 1,400 units for that model year. This came among lots of criticisms over safety, build quality, design, reliability, and so on. Basically, it looked, felt, and drove like the car was basically put together with a bunch of random bolts from a bucket, which is really unfortunate because the company behind the Hugo is actually very interesting with a history in arms trading and even building the Willys Jeep at one point. Still though, the Hugo GV is basically the cheapest little shitbox of a car ever, but it's got quite a cult following, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some communists in the comments section defending this thing. Now this next car you might recognize because it was Walter White's shitbox when he had both no money and no taste, and that's the Pontiac Aztec. From the second it was debuted, it was perceived as a hideous vehicle, and at no point did anyone ever think this was a good idea. But aside from the terrible exterior design, the Aztec functionally is not a terrible vehicle. I hate that I just said anything positive about the Aztec, but it's the truth. Functionally, it's not a bad vehicle. It's just really, really ugly. Supposedly, the GM designers behind this car had to compromise on the initial design, and eventually it morphed into this plastic-covered faux SUV that quite literally looks like something a little kid would draw if you asked them to design a car. Except I'm pretty sure a little kid could draw up something better looking than the Pontiac Aztec. Regardless, this car is absolutely hideous, and it'll go down as likely the ugliest vehicle in modern automotive history. But because it's so universally hated and because everyone considers it to be an ugly car, it's actually gained a new cult following with people who just want to be different and buy a car that everyone hates. Or it's for people who just want to look like Walter White.
You're goddamn right.
Moving from Pontiac to Plymouth, let's take a look at the coolest, worst car ever, and that's the Plymouth Prowler. Never in my life did I think I would say anything positive about the Prowler, but here we are. Now this is a funky car you've probably seen around once or twice. It's supposed to pay homage to hot rods of the past while also being modern underneath. And when it first came around in 1997, it immediately generated a lot of buzz and attention. But there was one problem. The retro design, the throwback to hot rods of the old days, that attracted a certain type of buyer, namely boomers. And you know what boomers love more than anything? They love a V8 engine more than anything. Do you know what the Prowler was lacking? A V8 engine. I mean, seriously, how the heck can they design and put together a car like this and then shove a V6 engine in the front of it? Sure, it's not a bad engine outright, but it should have been a V8 from the start. That problem was made even worse by the fact that this car was never available with a manual transmission. It was only available with an automatic. And it's not like it was a decent automatic transmission either. The unfortunate truth is that the Prowler was all bark and no bite. Throughout its 4-year production run, they built approximately 11,000 units of the Prowler, which has since helped this become somewhat of a cult car. Honestly, one of these cars set up as a drift car would be pretty interesting, but only because it's wrong in all the right ways. Now, this next car we have looked at in previous videos if you've been around this channel before, and that's the 3rd generation Camaro. And not just any 3rd generation Camaro in particular, but specifically the Iron Duke Camaros with their 2.5-liter Iron Duke engine outputting a whopping 85 horsepower. I seriously cannot believe that they offered a Camaro with just 85 horsepower from a 2.5-liter engine, but in this context, it actually kind of makes sense. In the 1970s, fuel prices were out of control and Americans wanted more fuel-efficient cars. What better way to make some money as a business than to take your existing pony car and give it a smaller engine? It has all the looks of the big boy pony car while also being light on your wallet. At least that's the theory. But with just 85 horsepower, there's no amount of fuel saving that offsets the horrible performance of this car. And you might even think I'm exaggerating about the poor performance of this car, but it's worse than you think. The 2.5-liter Iron Duke Camaro has a lightning fast 0 to 60 time of 20 seconds. And even worse than that, it has a terrible 3-speed transmission behind it. At least if this thing had a manual transmission of some sort, you could at least clutch kick it or do something to have some fun. But with just 85 horsepower and a 3-speed transmission, safe to say that the Iron Duke Camaro is not going to do any hooning anytime soon. Next up on the list of terrible cars is the Ford Pinto, but it's not here for the reason that you would expect. Sure, it's another dinky subcompact American car with funny proportions and overall just goofy looking, but other than that, it actually wasn't a bad car. That is until you got in a rear-end collision. With this car in particular, there was a lot of criticism around the design of the fuel tank, which was more vulnerable than it should have been and could easily become punctured in the case of a rear-end collision. The result is obviously fuel leakage and often the car burning to the ground. Obviously, this is horribly unsafe, and you would think that Ford would want to take care of their customers who bought this car, whether doing it honorably, doing it the right way, or even doing it forced through the legal justice system. But they didn't. In fact, Ford executives knew about these potential safety issues 2 years before the car was released to the public, which allegedly circled through Ford's senior management team and was signed off on. The memo was later leaked to the public, and it showed that Ford had done the math for either recalling these cars for their safety issues or leaving them as is, literally putting their customers' lives in danger. They figured out that it was cheaper to just let these cars burn one by one as they went into accidents, rather than recall all of them and fix them properly. And I gotta say, it's pretty messed up that Ford knew that the Pinto was a literal flaming death trap of a car and chose to do nothing about it. Regardless, it's safe to say that the Pinto is one of the worst cars of all time. Now, this next car you may have seen on your TV at one point or another through a little-known TV show known as Top Gear. And if you've seen the Top Gear episode before, you know exactly why this car is on this list, and that's the Reliant Robin, the strange and unconventional tiny British car with just 3 wheels. Unfortunately though, they put the single wheel on the wrong axle. If you've ever ridden a 3-wheeler when you were a kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's pain. And for those who haven't figured it out by now exactly what I mean, the Reliant Robin is on this list because it's hilariously easy to tip over because it has this single wheel on the front axle and not the rear. But despite its weird quirks and tendency to quite literally flip over, this car has quite a big cult following. It's another very weird cult car, and it's particularly loved by people who just love doing things differently. Seriously though, the Reliant Robin is actually a pretty interesting car in automotive history, but it's just not good to put a single wheel on your front axle and they learned that lesson. Last but not least on this list of absolutely terrible cars is a car that all of you out there are familiar with, and just about all of you out there know exactly why it's on this list. And it's a car that you might not expect, and it even might offend you that it's on this list, but that's your slow ass car. Seriously, how long are you gonna let it sit on jack stands for? It's almost summertime and you're still not finished with it? If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash the thumbs up button, get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. Check out some of the other stuff on the channel. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We post a lot on there too. I'll see you guys in the next one.